We've got him. He's carrying a body. You seeing this, Command? It's not human.
I've carried wounded miners, lost hunters, people who fell off cliffs and got stuck in trees. I know the weight of others by the vibration of my helicopter. That night, September 22nd, 1994, the air was dense and the altitude was eating up engine power. We left Page heading for a mirror signaling call on the edge of the reservation, near an unnamed canyon we called Knife. Bad radio, tailwind, moonless sky. I kept my high 8 on the dashboard, an idiot habit, to record training and storm. Lightning. The observer, Carter, clipped the spotlight to the mount. The county police frequency crackled with only 2 words. Man down. When we arrived, there was no flare. There were no people waving. There was movement on the plateau, far from the cliff. A figure walking with something on its shoulder. I descended to 200 feet. The spotlight caught wet leather, fur, and a shine in the eyes that wasn't an animal's eyes. The figure did not quicken its pace. It adjusted the weight on its shoulder. What was hanging was a human body, an arm swinging with an open hand, the palm pale against the dark stone. "Are you seeing this?" I said on the intercom. Carter didn't answer. The engine seemed to choke in the same rhythm as my heart. The HI-8 was recording. I know it was recording because the red light kept blinking on the panel. The rescue radio broke the silence and my voice came in. "Maintain altitude, Jack." My voice, the same, but with a half-second delay. I didn't say that. Don't say my name on the radio. If one day the wind returns your voice to you from the ground, don't descend. In briefs, we learn to listen to the machine, main rotor, tail, NG, TOTI. The Bell 206 speaks to me with static and high pitches. When something changes, I feel it in my gut before the panel. That night, high temperature, low density, the machine demanded respect. The altimeter read 500 feet, wind 12 knots southwest. I swept the spotlight, crisscrossing tableland and valley. The light hit the red rock and came back dirty, as if the air were full of thick dust. Carter said visual, his voice too low. I pointed the nose and saw parallel track of long footprints and a drag, as if something was being pulled without fully touching the ground. There were dark stains on the rocks, not fresh blood, old stains reactivated by the light. The smell rose, strong, wet iron. In the helicopter, you always smell fuel and hot oil. At that moment, I smelled wet fur. The county radio locked on, static. Between one crackle and the next, the same voice I use when I'm calm. "Maintain altitude, Jack. Don't go lower." Carter turned to me slowly, like someone waking up, and asked, without moving his lips, "Did you speak?" I shook my head and felt the 206 float like a boat in still water. The figure on the plateau stopped. It looked without looking, head slightly below the human angle, as if the neck wouldn't accept the weight. It had narrow shoulders, a lean torso, and wet hair on the yeet's collarbones stuck in a dark mass. The body on the shoulder swung with the rhythm of the step, too disjointed to be alive. I dropped to 150 feet. The airspeed came in dirty on the blades. Shudder. I adjusted the collective. Carter whispered, "Is there more?" The camera caught 2 bright spots between stones, distant, like eyes, fixed, horizontal. 2. The entire plateau seemed to be watching. I said, "Call base, say it's a medical extraction." Carter reached for the PTT and the click answered. First, the perfect sound of our own PTT, an imitation, with no message. The spotlight wavered, and for a second, the figure and the weight on its shoulder disappeared from the image. There was no path to hide. When the light stabilized, it was 20 meters ahead, unhurried. I know strides. Humans accelerate when lit. Animals run. That thing adjusted its body as if switching arms, and the free arm ended with a thumb too low, the wrong joint. The intercom crackled in my ear like bones. The altitude. Warning sounded for nothing. I climbed. Carter fastened his seatbelt tightly and said, now, in the voice of my instructor, who died in 91, correct the heading, son. The engine sang normally, but I knew the night had learned to imitate. When I turned the nose east, someone knocked on the fuselage, 3 short taps, 1 long, like someone hitchhiking. The shudder changed frequency. It moved to my bone. The spotlight made a cone of light that the wind broke into plates. On the ground, the figure adjusted the body on its shoulder and bent over on all fours for a moment, as if that were natural, and being bipedal was the effort. The human body hung with its face toward the back, the mouth open without sound, the tongue dark, dry. GPS mark, I said. Carter jotted the coordinate on the pad. The HI-8 kept blinking, steady. I saw it out of the corner of my eye. The sound rose from the plateau, not a voice, breathing configured to sound like a voice. Jack, wrongly stretched coming. From the wrong side of the headset. I took one side of the headset off and heard it in the air, the rotor itself returning my name. The figure stopped and carefully put the body down. It didn't just lay it down, it positioned it with a familiar delicacy, like someone who has carried people before. Carter started crying silently, and I didn't ask. In the canyon, echo is a weapon. You feed what imitates you. I approached closer, 120 feet. The crosswind hit and the 206 shook. The spotlight caught. Hands. The fingers were too long. The skin on the knuckles shone smooth, without calluses, like skin stretched in the wrong place. The eyes, when the light touched them, did not blink. They remained conscious, like those of a man deciding which part of you he takes. The county radio finally opened. Team on site in 20. Before the static closed, my voice came over it. No need to come. Carter looked at me, pleading for denial. I shook my head. It wasn't me. The cabin recorder's VU meter moved. On its own, as if someone had spoken in the silence. The figure lifted the body again, now on the opposite shoulder. I saw marks on the rock. Stones aligned in a half moon, the opening facing us. Territory. I understood too late. The light was the bait. I was drawing our path with the spotlight. I descended 10 feet. The rotor's shadow swept the stone, and the smell rose stronger. Burnt leather, old blood, wet fur. Carter pointed, trembling. Eyes on the edge. There was another one. Low, long. That vanished when the spotlight passed. I thought of the checklist like a prayer. Mixture-rich, anti-ice, torque, vibration. The figure below slowly raised its head to the light and smiled without teeth. It wasn't a mouth, it was skin learning to open. The body on its shoulder spoke with my voice. Maintain altitude, Jack. When I brought the spotlight back to the body, it blinked, not the eyes. The delay blinked. I brought the helicopter into a bad idea low hover, 9,100 feet AGL. The steer downwash kicked up dust and tore hairs from the ground. Yes, hairs shedding like grass. The figure didn't shield its eyes. It didn't blink. The body on its shoulder swung and responded to the wind with a joint snap that didn't come from human bone. Carter locked the spotlight in narrow mode, direct spot. The circle of light trapped the figure. It didn't leave. Instead, it moved closer to the cliff as if teaching risk. I heard in the headset the exact tone of my old supervisor, who died in a rollover. If you keep going, you'll lose lift. I cut the collective 2 fingers. The 206 gained air. The figure stopped at the edge. It lowered the human body to the ground with the care of a paramedic and touched the dead man's forehead. A human gesture, wrong in the angle. Then it turned and showed its ear to the light. It was waiting for the sound. I understood. It learns by sound. I opened my mouth to talk to Carter and heard my own breathing coming from the ground, delayed. I closed my mouth. The air felt heavy. I felt watched from within. The Hi-8 camera caught everything. Texture of stretched skin, human eyes in a face that doesn't plug. I remember because I replayed it frame by frame later in a windowless room with 2 men who didn't introduce themselves, thin tie, expensive pen, They already knew what they were going to take. The figure made the PTT sound perfect and said, in Carter's voice, "Jack, climb." Carter looked at me, his mouth mute. I climbed 30 feet. The plateau responded with 3 dull thuds, knocks in the wrong rhythm of my heart. Territory. Proximity became contact without touch. The air between us heated up as if it had skin. The smell entered the cockpit, sweet iron, fur, ozone. I felt the 3 a.m. nausea. The cabin recorder picked up a child's voice, the voice of my son, who was 2 years old. "Daddy, don't go down," I cried silently, just like Carter moments before. The figure raised the body as if offering. I almost believed it was a plea for help. Then I saw marks on the body's neck, not from teeth, from a hand with a low, out-of-place thumb. It took one more step. The emptiness of the canyon responded like a mouth. If I followed, I would fall. Mental checklist. Sufficient fuel, bearable crosswind, torque in the green zone. Rescue ethics versus instinct. I knew every second in a hover-drained margin. I knew no one would arrive by land in time. I also knew that thing knew our weight. "We're leaving," I said. Carter didn't answer. I looked. He was holding the flare holster, gripping it like holding a hand. The plateau made the sound of footsteps that didn't displace dust. The figure vanished from the center and appeared closer to the edge with the body on its shoulder. No transition. I didn't see the passage. It was like skipping frames. I thought of turning the night sun to max and blinding the thing's vision. I did. The spotlight whitened the rock. The figure didn't react. It just turned its face and showed its eye, a human eye, to the light. The highest state of fear is not the scream, it is recognition. I almost turned off the high 8, almost. I kept the rec. Time stretched. I made a slow turn to gain clean air and a line for departure. That's when the voice came in as an emergency call on 121.5, the international frequency. In my voice, "Mayday, mayday, engine failure." My engine was perfect, but the tower responded and fixed the country's eyes on our position. Carter said, "Jack," in the voice of my father, who died in '88. "Don't turn your back." I turned. When the nose left the canyon, something hit the tail. 3 short, 1 long. The machine howled for half a second. I corrected with the left pedal before thinking, decision is wait. I chose to live, but I filmed as I left. And the camera caught a single frame that I can't explain. The figure standing very upright without the body, and behind it, higher, something looking over the edge, horizontal, eyes that do not blink. When we passed the canyon, the radio opened with the true Carter's voice. Now it was him. "Final mark recorded," I said. Recorded. Did I lie? I wanted to believe I did. Water, coffee, maintenance room with a noisy fan. The mechanic asked for my high 8 tape to see the engine flare on the climb. I said I needed to check it at home. Carter wouldn't look at me. His hands were shaking, but the tremor was out of rhythm. Half a second delayed. In the late afternoon, the unmarked pickup truck appeared. 2 men, thin suits, haircut in the same place. They showed nameless credentials and a metal briefcase. They asked for everything: tape, cabin recorder card, maintenance logs for the week. They spoke of air traffic investigation as if a helicopter were a Boeing. I said, "There are deaths involved." The one with the grey tie replied, "That's why." We watched it together in the briefing room. The HI-8 showed a field of stars, a cone of light, a figure with something on its shoulder. The audio picked up my voice telling myself to climb. The one with the blue tie made notes on time, frame, latitude. No one commented on the missing frame, the jump. When it ended, they didn't rewind, they just put it away. I asked for a copy. The grey one said, "Matter of public safety, risk of panic." He looked at me without blinking for too long. Human time blinks. He didn't. Carter missed 2 days, came back with his face smelling of metal. He said he dreamed of the plateau, of knocks on the fuselage in the rhythm of 3 short, 1 long. Me too. The 206 parked, creaked at night in the same beat. I touched the cowling. Warm. The internal radio sometimes opened by itself and played the PTT click. No message, just the perfect sound of the click. I turned off the breaker. The sound continued. I turned off my mind. The connection with that thing wasn't friendship. It was one-way learning. It carried a body and a pilot that night. One on its shoulder, the other through the air. I started recognizing my sound when it wasn't me. On the morning of the third day, someone knocked on the 206's hood. 3 short, 1 long. There was no one on the tarmac. The smell of wet fur rose from the hot metal. The men returned a week later with a receipt. Material seized for analysis. They also took the logbook, the map, with circular routes, and Carter's notebook. They said the body was recovered further north, a victim of a fall. They showed a blurry Polaroid of a black bag. No coordinate, no time. I asked about the 121.5 audio with my fake Mayday. They knew. Atmospheric interference, the grey one said. It happens. The blue one asked if I had heard my own voice before. I lied that I hadn't. He smiled, a toothless, wrinkle-free smile. At home, I had a bad backup. Snippets the high 8 recorded in the viewfinder. A silly pilot trick. It wasn't the main tape, but it held frames. At 02:17 of the recording, the cone of light catches the figure adjusting the body. I pause. I advance frame by frame. In one of them, the eyes stare at the lens. Human eyes. I stared too long. They blinked afterwards. In the middle of the night, knocks on the door. 3 short, 1 long. I stopped breathing as I learned in the canyon. Silence. Then breathing on the wrong side of the wood. My wife asked, "Is someone there?" I said, "Wind." The wind doesn't breathe. I went back to the hangar. The 206, cold, smelled warm. I touched the panel. Hot. The intercom was off, but it opened. Maintain altitude. Jack. I sat on the cabin floor and understood that I didn't bring anything. I was what was coming. When I left, in the dark, my reflection in the cabin glass looked at me. It was me, unblinking. I waved to myself. I didn't answer. They called us for a search near where everything started. 2 missing campers. I wanted to refuse. I went. Carter didn't go. Sore throat. I took a new paramedic, Ruiz. Wind 15 knots, dust, bad heat. The canyon recognized the sound of the 206. The sound recognized me back. The spotlight caught a torn backpack and rope. On the plateau, recent drag marks. I turned the nose and then saw the body, not the same one, similar outline, being carried by 2 low, long shapes on all 4s. The one guiding raised its head too high and looked sideways with human eyes. Ruiz swallowed hard. "Do we have to descend?" I said. "There is nowhere." He asked, "What if someone is alive?" The body swung and hit its heel on the stone. Bone sound. It wasn't alive. I turned off the spotlight. Complete darkness. I turned it back on in wide mode. The shapes changed place. One stood in front, upright, trying to learn bipedalism. It fell slightly like something reconfiguring. The radio opened with Ruiz's voice, but he was beside me. "Jack, authorize landing." Ruiz showed me his hands. He wasn't speaking. I turned off the radio. The tower spoke my prefix, asking for location confirmation. A second tower with the same voice answered for me. I filmed with my backup, high 8. They had taken the official one. The camera captured the sound through the panel vibration. I knew that, again, someone would knock on my door later. The main shape lifted the body towards us, offering. There is no more human gesture than asking for a witness. I understood. It wasn't a plea for help. It was food for the imitation. The more we look, the more it teaches. When I turned to leave, the PTT clicked on its own, and my voice, perfect, said, "No further contact." The worst was the echo, my son repeating half a second later. I returned from the flight with tapes that weren't the tapes. They showed enough to condemn me to sleeplessness. I told 2 officers. 3 cars came. They didn't ask clear questions. They asked for collaboration and secrecy for national security. The phrase national security gets dirty when you smell fur coming from a suit. They took my tapes, they asked for my shirt, fuel contamination. They kept my pocket recorder. I signed papers. I didn't read. They would return sanitized copies. They laughed without wrinkles. They didn't blink. I needed to prove to myself it wasn't my head. I walked back to the plateau, alone, late afternoon. I brought an analog recorder with a new tape and an old hidden recorder. On the first cliff, 3 short taps, one long on my backpack, not an echo. A touch. The smell of iron preceded the wind. The canyon's silence filled with a breathing that was learning. The recorder picked up PTT clicks. Before I pressed, I sat on the edge and said, "I know you know." The echo answered no before the canyon. Whoever answered was behind me. I turned slowly. The shape was standing, very close, very thin. Wrong skin glued to the bone, human eyes unblinking. And, God forgive me, it was carrying an old handheld recorder, the interview kind, with a blank tape. It was imitating, training. I took a step back. The rock knocked down a small stone. Down below, the sound returned, 3 short, 1 long. The recorder in the thing's hand clicked on its own. Perfect PTT, and my voice came out of it, torn. Wrong, but mine. Maintain altitude, Jack. The proof is this, when there's no radio and the frequency still finds you. I walked backward. I didn't run. If you run, it learns the sound forever. Years later, I can say without trembling, it wasn't hunting, it wasn't our ritual, it was function, collecting voices, weights, steps, testing, measuring, repeating, turning us into a walking library to cross the night and the desert. The human body on its shoulder, proof of hand, proof of weight, proof of how to hold what is carried. It didn't run from the light, it learned from it. It moved like a bad pilot trying a straight flight, correcting step by step, approaching what we look like. The government confiscating the tape, not for us, for it. Every sample teaches, every sample is food. What does it want? For us to answer, what did I learn? Not answering saves more than praying. The man in the tie who didn't blink? Maybe just a man. Maybe another type of person who learned not to blink in the face of the impossible. They took the tape and left me with the sound. The sound cannot be confiscated. I discovered that the 206 still talks to me in the hangar sometimes, with my voice half a second delayed. The metal holds vibration, the cabin holds breath, the propeller remembers weight. On the plateau, every stone steps later. You walk and the trail walks behind. If you don't look, you forget. If you film, you teach. I understood that I became part of what I saw, not as a victim, as a vector. I started sleeping with the headset on, plugged into the void, to hear when the void begins to speak. I asked for a transfer. I changed companies. I went to fly wildfire. It sounds like a joke. I thought human fire would be less harmful than a night that imitates. The rotor speaks another dialect, but the echo found me anyway. During a fire at the Mogolon Rim, the smoke plume crossed. The panel with a smell of fur. No animals nearby. 3 short knocks, 1 long came from the Bell's landing gear, tapping with the wind. The operator laughed. Looks like we got a ride. I didn't laugh. I changed hangars, changed cities, changed homes. The recording I made of nothing follows me. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, the headset opens and I call myself. Maintain altitude, Jack? I don't answer. Never answer your echo out of time. I received an envelope years later. A poor copy of my own tape from the mail with no return address. Inside, half the flight. Everything is there except 2 seconds. The 2 where it lifted the body towards us and smiled without a mouth. They took them out. The intention remained. I left the desert because I thought the city confuses echo. Sometimes it does. Sometimes an elevator makes a perfect PTT. Sometimes a train breathes after me. Sometimes my son calls me from the living room when he's asleep. I do a pre-flight every day, even when Not flying, hand on the fuselage, ear to the metal. If it's warm when it should be cold, I didn't take off, but someone arrived. I filmed. I saw it carrying a body. The government took the record and left me with the part that doesn't erase. The delay between what I say and what I hear. The engine goes quiet. The wind changes, but the delay remains. It is the measure of the night. If you fly and hear your voice where there shouldn't be a radio, don't answer. If the spotlight finds eyes that don't blink and a hand that holds a man as if he weighs nothing, don't enter a low hover. And if they knock on the fuselage in the rhythm of 3 short, 1 long, don't open the door for anyone on the ground. They said they were going to protect the public. Maybe they protected it from us. Every time I watch my faulty copy, I feel the air warm up like that night. The image worsens and I remember better. That's the trick. What's missing on the tape grows in the mind. If they call you by your name with your voice delayed by half a second, on the radio, in the headset, in the glass, climb. Don't descend. Don't teach your step. And if you have already taught, like me, accept the cost. The world will breathe after you. When I finally stop flying, I think I will still hear on the pillow. Maintain altitude, Jack. That's what I say to myself now, recording in the dark. The rotor stopped, the tape running alone. If the air answers, I don't answer. And if tomorrow they knock here 3 short, 1 long, I will do what I should have done that night. Not open, because the wind does not carry what breathes, and what breathes learns.